I've got one that can see.
Yes, but I hasten to say soft spot. This is what I consider a negative word.
Of the hundreds of behavioral projects undertaken by the CIA, getting ears appears to have been one of the more successful and more conventional. Other experiments were not as conventional. Neurophysicist Dr. Jose Delgado was financed by the Office of Naval Research. In this experiment, the bull is sedated. Electrodes are implanted in its brain. Delgado transmits an electronic impulse to the center of the bull's brain. Delgado has remote control of the animal. Recently released CIA documents refer to the feasibility of remote control of animals, and that special investigations will be conducted toward the application of selected elements of these techniques to man.
Aggression and violence, clearly fundamentals of the animal world. But from where in an animal's brain does such behavior emanate? And if we found such a site in an animal, could this volatile area also be located in the animal part of the human brain? An early experiment to locate the whereabouts of animal rage was performed on a bull in a Spanish bull ring. This strange archival film tells the story. In the 1960s, Professor Jose Delgado took a normally hostile bull and implanted electrodes into its brain, electrodes that could be activated by a radio transmitter. His objective was to see if stimulation of the bull's midbrain could short-circuit the rage signals, stopping the bull before it reached the matador. After the bull had recovered from the implantation and in mid-charge, the button was pressed. The bull's aggression ceased instantly, or so it seemed. A clearer experiment was performed with cats. In this classic example, the hypothalamus, the rhythm maker, was implanted with electrodes. Could it be responsible not just for rhythms, but also for rage? The switch is turned. Then the switch is turned off. So indeed, the hypothalamus does control certain types of aggression. Now, how could one possibly confirm this startling finding in human beings? Meet Mark Laribus.
My name is Mark Laribus. I feel that I'm a pretty easygoing guy. Try to get along with circumstances as best as I can.
You're still a menace to society.
In the Sacramento criminal court, Mark Laribus was accused of assaulting and almost killing his girlfriend's 2.5-year-old daughter.
It's hard to remember. It's been quite a while ago about the incident itself with the child. But I remember her crying, and I was laying on the couch, and then all of a sudden it just really got to me. And I rushed in there, and I remember hitting her. But I don't know why. I could never pinpoint why. I mean, nobody just goes up to a child and starts beating on them for no reason like that. Even with my own daughter, if she cries, I try to ask her why she's crying. Or, in sense, in a baby, you check them to see if they're wet or if they're hungry. But this time, it just really made me explode.
Mark Andrew Laribus, the man accused of molesting and almost killing a 2-year-old girl, was to have had a date set today for his preliminary hearing. But Laribus is in the University Medical Center, where doctors have discovered some sort of tumor or growth in his brain.
I first met Mark about 3 days after the assault. He had become depressed and even suicidal and was admitted to our hospital to the psychiatric unit. This allowed us to begin a diagnostic study of what might have caused the change in Mark's personality.
He couldn't understand how this act could have occurred, how he could have been responsible for this kind of behavior. And yet, as we reviewed his history, it was evident that he had been having more and more outbursts, and it had been more difficult for him to control his emotional responses to tense situations in the several weeks prior to his admission.
At first, he was very sweet, kind and considerate, just perfect gentleman, and then slowly but surely he would be getting upset all the time. It'd go like 6 months, then 3 months, and then every month, every 2 weeks, every week, and then it was every day. So it was just kind of like a gradual change, but it just kept getting worse and worse.
I could never figure out about me losing my temper so quick. I could never understand it.
He'd walk in the door and just look at me and start throwing things all over the house, come at me and strike me.
I never thought about that I might have something wrong inside my brain.
We began a series of routine studies for conditions of this sort. One of those was an X-ray called a CAT scan. In this study, we were able to demonstrate the fact that there was a shadow here at the end of the temporal lobe on the right side. This kind of finding suggests a tumor. We couldn't be sure from the initial findings what kind of tumor this was, but its location and shape at this point suggested that it was a cyst. A cyst is like a balloon, and it slowly can fill with fluid over a period of years, increasing the pressure on the structures that are adjacent to the tumor itself.
The tumor was located in an area of the brain where pressure was being exerted through the amygdala against the hypothalamus, parts of the brain thought to be involved with aggression. 5 weeks after his arrest, Mark Laribas's tumor was surgically removed.
When I woke up from the anesthesia, everything seemed more real to me for some reason, that I could handle myself a lot better. The world seems a whole lot better for you.
He could control his temper so much better. I mean, I hadn't even seen him control it as good before as he did afterwards. And he was really willing to try to work things out between me and him.
I never thought it could be that good for me. As though, even though I was going through a criminal trial.
I'll catch you.
No!
Mark Laribas is now back with his family. His own daughter is nearly 5 years old, and his wife is expecting another child. Mark has resumed work with his former employer. Those closest to him have now relegated his violent behavior to the past. In a sense, Mark Laribas's bout with rage was an experiment that nature caused to happen. His actions demonstrate the dynamite charge the hypothalamus can detonate.
There we go.
While most explosions of violence cannot be dealt with by surgery, Mark's tragic experience illustrates how our animal brain invades our human days.
Here's a question. Is artificial intelligence the next evolution in humanity, or is it the beginning of the end for civilization as we know it? Could go either way, right? And since no one really knows what the end game is here, we as humans kind of need to play both sides of the field. On the one hand, AI could be spectacularly useful for accelerating development in fields like technology and biology. As long as humans stay one step ahead of the computers, then we're on the fast track to a golden age. But what if the AI surpasses humans? Does that put the computer in the driver's seat and leave us riding shotgun? Moving forward with AI development is a big risk to take without having some kind of measure in place to mitigate it. And that's where Elon Musk's Neuralink comes in, a brain-computer interface device that could facilitate a kind of symbiosis between human and AI. If the idea holds true, then Elon could be setting us up for a world where it's not a case of us versus them, so much as a case of us and them combining together into something else entirely. But what would that be? Let's talk about it. Of course, there are a lot of opinions out there about whether artificial intelligence is good or bad. It's a spectrum of ideas. On one end, you've got a figure like Mark Zuckerberg. He thinks that AI is fantastic and can only do good things. Zuckerberg has said, quote, "I think that AI is going to unlock a huge amount of positive things, whether that's helping to identify and cure diseases, to help cars drive more safely, to help keep our communities safe." And he makes a fair point. Those are objectively good things. On the other end, you've got someone like Stephen Hawking, who feared that AI would simply become the new dominant force of Earth. Hawking once said, quote, "The development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. It would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate."
Living below in this old sinful world, hardly a comfort can afford. Sing it with me. Striving alone to face temptation so. Oh, won't you tell me where could I go but to the Lord?
Here's the story that Ron Wyatt told me before he died. I sat in his living room, talked to him for 3 hours about the Ark of the Covenant. He said, "Brother Hovind, I found the Ark of the Covenant." I said, "Yeah, right. Okay, and I'm Methuselah. I'm still around." He said, "No, Brother Hovind, I really did." I said, "Well, tell me about it, Ron." Now, Ron was a great guy. He was the kind of guy that if I was God, I would let him find all these things, because he wasn't out for any glory. He's not bragging about it. He wasn't, not looking for money. Just wanted to, he's a humble servant of the Lord. He had a lot of Seventh-day Adventist teaching in him, which I would disagree with, some of the things they teach. He wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist, but he believed some of the things they believe, okay? He said, "I was walking along the north side of Jerusalem and with an Israeli friend of mine, and we're walking along, talking about things, and what happened here, because Ron's been a student of Scripture for many, many years, okay, and knew it extremely well. He said, we're walking along, all of a sudden my left arm stuck out, and I pointed to this garbage dump. There's a pile of rubble been there for hundreds of years, up against the side of this cliff, and there's a road along the bottom, there's a big cliff, and another plateau on top. He said, my left arm stuck out, and my mouth started speaking. And my mouth said, that's Jeremiah's grotto. The Ark of the Covenant's down there.
I've got one that can see.